Okay, so we're holding at the end of Siman Kuf Hey. We're going to be doing 5 seifim, short seifim, Yud to Yudalad. They're not too difficult. The last section, the last portion of Kuf Hey deals with Melicha. So last time we spoke a little bit about the concepts of Melicha, how it works, plus the various shitas of how much does Melicha actually aser. We're familiar with Netila from Tzli, a unique measure that only applies to Tzli for the most part. And B'chdei Shishim we have already seen various times. And Kedei Klipa we're also familiar with. But in Melicha there seems to be a machloikas. And the machloikas really revolves around what's involved. If it's kochush, if we're talking about something lean, then there seems to be more or less a consensus that it's not a big deal. The most the problem would involve is a klipa. If they're both maluach, as we will see, it makes things more complicated. But what we've done so far is we've seen the Mechaber and the Ramaz Shita concerning the difference between kochush and shaman. We haven't really discussed which of them is maluach so much, but whether there's kochush and shaman. Kochush seems to be not a problem, shaman appears to be a problem, according to both Mechaber and Ramaz Shishim. Even though there is one shita, believe it or not, that does hold that in any case, regardless of what you have, no matter how it is, it's always going to be kedek. Melicha is not so as powerful, even though it says Meliach keroseach that's. It's not exactly like tzli. So it's less than the tzli. So the shaman is going to aser till shishim. The chidush of the mechaber was that heter mefatem leisur even by melicha. He holds yesh pitum b'melicha. Pitum, the concept of pitum that we learned by tzli, that the heter could be mefatem leisur. In other words, by tzli that there's only heat and there's no roitev. We said it's only kedei natila, right? It could aser beyond natila if it's shaman. But what if the Isser is not shaman, the heter is shaman, they're next to each other, roasted. There's a concept called heter mefatem le'isser. We explained how that works. But not everybody subscribes to it. But we're machmir. Heter mefatem le'isser. And since heter is mefatem le'isser, heter mefatem only applies when something is shaman. So even though the heter is a shaman and not the isser, it still can become usher if they're next to each other by tzli. So by Melicha, I would think that doesn't apply. And not everybody says it applies. But the Mechaber does say, Pitum also applies by Melicha. So therefore, if the heter is shaman, what do we know so far, without learning Halacha Yud and Yud Aleph? What we know so far is that even in Melicha, if the heter is shaman, it would be a problem. They're touching each other. There's Gia, of course, as far as we know so far. They're touching each other. We don't know how they're touching yet, but they're touching. And the heter would be mefatem le'iser. So that's the difference between kochush and shaman. Seif Tes went on to describe several other chilukim between the Mechaber and Ramah about do we mitzaref all the chatichas that are being salted together? Can we or can we not be mitzaref all the chatichas? Plus the concept of isur davuk, which we're familiar with from the past, that a piece of meat that has the chaylev stuck to it, attached to it, is of course in worse shape than the rest of the chatichas because of the way isur davuk works. As we explained, either that it's memaher livloya, right, that it absorbs faster. That was one explanation, or that simply it could be that before the other pieces were involved in being mevatalet, it had already somehow managed to become usher in itself and become chanan. In other words, if everything is there at the same time, then somehow the isur is spread even. But there is a possibility that the isur does not spread even. There is the potential for that, and that can happen with an isur davuk more than any other thing. Other kinds of isurim, other kinds of scenarios. So there are various explanations to why the Ramah, who is the one that expounds on this concept of isur davuk, says that isur davuk could be a problem. The Mechaber doesn't get into the explanations of isur davuk. He just says that the gabe de chaticha atzmo, that the isur is dovuk to it, you would need a klipa, even if there's shishim. That's all he says. In other words, even though we said you may need shishim to be mevatalet, and you have the shishim, still, you would need to take kedei netilas mokom, ulefochos klipa, bechol ze le'inyan chaticha atzmo shoyo chelev dovuk bo. That's all he says about isur dovuk here. You would still take, at the very least, a klipa. But the other chatichas are nimlach b'yachad, and they're all touching. We don't say that the chelev is mefapeah from one to another, that you could be mitzaref all of them. The Ramah goes on to explain here that even though he's machmir between kochush and shomen, that we can't differentiate, he's the big machmir on kochush shomen. Says here we will be mekel, to be mitzaref everything. And that's interesting. It's a very interesting Ramah here, that he's mekel, at least there's a hefset for sure. And the reason for that is because he says we can always rely on the shita of the Ravio, who says that Melicha only answers kedei. That's a big chiddush, was to rely on that one shita, which usually we're not relying on the one shita. But for the purposes of being mitzaref, you can be mitzaref. And even though we're talking about chatichas aruyos leiskabed, the Mechaber says, there's one way where you can get out of the trouble is if you have roiv. In other words, you know that he did not touch all of them. Well, then you have the possibility of actually of bitul beroiv. That's the only thing that Mechaber allows for. The possibility of bitul beroiv, when you know that the majority were not affected. They did not have any contact with the Isser. So anyway, that was the Seif test. In Seif Yud, we're introduced to a situation where the two are maluach. In other words, Mechaber goes back and clarifies, Bamed vorim amurim, that Melicha asers kidei klipo or kidei shishim. Keshaisu veheter shnehim meluchim. All that I have said until now, when is it a real problem? When the two are salted. Everything is being salted together. Why is that important to know? It is important, and we will need to keep this in mind as we continue to learn the following halachas, that everybody, except for, I think it's the Ran, just about everybody agrees with the concept that Melicha has the koach to be mavliya into something else, right? But not to be maflit, the flavor of something else. It's not bishul, and it's not even sli in that respect. That's as far as Melicha can do. That's as far as it can go. It can take whatever it has and be mavliya into something else. But to actually be maflit through the koach of melach, of its salt, to be maflit from something else, unless that something else is maliach too, maluach too. If that something else is salty too, well, obviously they're both are emitting to each other, so they're both being mavliya into each other. You follow? So that's what he's saying in clarifying the previous halacha of Melicha. Of Melicha kireseach she'eno nechal machmas molcha. We're talking about something very, very salty, right? The asers either kedei klipa or kedei shishin, depending on what's involved. If it's shaman or not, that's only when the two are maluach, the two are salted. So bamed vorim amurim k'sha'isur veheter shnei meluchim. V'afilu isur maliach. But even if the isur by itself is maliach, v'heter tofel. So here we have again one of them being maluach, but the one that's maluach is the isur one. Okay, it would also be sufficient for it to aser the heter. Why? Because the maliach or the maluach one is mavliya in the heter. So therefore, you have basar that's kosher, basar being salted with basar that is not kosher by mistake. Somebody did not separate them. He left them there. Everything salted everything. You would have this problem. Everything is salted, and you have a piece of treif meat or a nevela or whatever, and a kosher piece of meat. They're both salted together by mistake, whatever. Still, it's a problem. It's a big problem. Now, for those of you who have the time and you want to see the makor to this halacha of both being maluach, one being maluach and not the other, it's Gemara in Chulin Kuf Gimel, and over there the Gemara really discusses an interesting case of a dag tohor shemolchim dag tomeh. You have shark that was salted with carp, whatever, right? Treif fish with kosher fish by mistake. You know, there are problems these days, sometimes at least with some fishing camp, with tuna fish. What's the problem with tuna? Maybe they grounded up some dolphin meat. They caught in the nets. How do you know they're catching only tuna fish? So the better ashgachas, of course, have to ascertain that this is, for the most part, tuna and not other fish. Otherwise, you have a problem over here. No, I mean you can have you can have all kinds of situations where it's very, very rare that something can happen, but not that it easily happens. No, it easily happens. Okay, so we throw it in. Big deal. Big deal for us. It's a big deal.
If you buy a can of a little,
no, most likely you don't.
It says always dolphin fruit. Doesn't say
right, exactly. Some of them will going to say that. Well, that was not only because of kashrus, but because even goyim don't want it. Right. Yeah. Yeah, they have some system. I'm not that familiar with the system. They have some system where they can eliminate almost all possibilities, dolphin, at least, things that, those fish that are found next to tuna.
Usually it's Melicha.
Yeah.
So it could give off, it could absorb.
Right.
So why don't we then say if the two pieces from the other?
Well, that's a good point. And in Hilchas Melicha, we discussed this a little bit, that so long as a piece of meat is being maflit its blood, remember, Ilan, anything about this?
Well,
there's a concept. You may have seen it in Basar b'chalav too. You may have gone through it. So there's a concept as long as something is emitting blood, its own blood, it cannot absorb from somewhere else.
Right.
Okay? There's even something called dam mishrek shorik. It's a concept. Blood falls off. It doesn't reabsorb what it took out. It's an important. When we learn Hilchas Melicha, we'll go into that. An interesting point. Here we're not talking about necessarily Melicha of dam, which may be a little bit different, because so long as it is busy, it is occupied, emitting its own blood, it will not absorb other blood. So like a canceling effect.
Right.
A canceling effect, yeah.
But it doesn't do that for Tam?
Right. So here we're talking about Isser and Heter, right? It does not have that power to block. It is not really taking out something other than a little bit of flavor. It does not have that koach. Hey, I'm busy taking out my own time. I'm not going to absorb your time. No, that doesn't apply here. It can apply by dam because of what's coming out. It's busy. It's occupied by taking out its own blood. It will not accept other dam. But here,
without taste, right?
yes,
Right. No substance.
exactly. Yeah. So this halacha that Rabbi is about to elaborate on is taken from the Gemara that deals especially there with the example of dagim, but it's the same halacha, salted. And the Gemara there makes a differentiation between both being salted and one being salted. And the question is, does it make a difference which one was salted? It does. So there's various scenarios, both being salted, one being salted. The one being salted is the Isser, or the one being salted is the Heter. Basically, three kinds of situations. So, Bamed Dvar Mamurim, again, when did we say that the Melicha can pose a problem? Obviously, Kisha Isur ve'Heter Shnei Meluchim, or Vafilu Isur Meliach ve'Heter Tofel. If the Isur is the one that's salted, because it will emit and be mavliya into the Heter, that's fine. It will be also. Aval ima Heter Maluach, if the one that is Maluach is the Heter, ve'Isur is Tofel, Eino Tzorech Elo Adocha. All you need is a docha. V'yesh oisrim im noigim ze b'zeh, v'yesh lehaket b'mokom hefser. I think that's the Ran. Yeah, the Ran is the one that even though everybody's learning the same Gemara, that's what's interesting. They're learning. Sometimes you learn the same Gemara, but you have a little bit. What did the Gemara really mean? The Ran says when the Gemara says that in the scenario where the tofel is the Isser, tofel meaning it's not salty, and the heter is the one that's salty, it's not a problem at all. Right? And all you need, according to Mechaber, all you need is a docha. So the Ramah who brings down the Shita that are Asers, he's basically referring to the Ramah. What's Pshat? What's the difference? Obviously we're talking about Noigim Zebezeh. No, because it's not so clear 100% according to the Ran. What the Gemara says, Noigim Zebezeh, did we mean actually physical contact between the two pieces of meat, pieces of fish, or is it that just their tzir, whatever is flowing is touching. The Ran says, you know when it's okay? When the tzir is touching, when there's actually physical contact on that spot, there's going to be blias, regardless of who is salted. Regardless of who is salted. There's contact, there's touching. The Gemara did not mean that. So the Ran is the only one, I think, that says that when is it mutter complete and just by dacha? They were next to each other, but they weren't touching. What was touching or what came in touch was what traveled between them. The mohel, the tzir, whatever one, if that was, this came from the salty one, traveled to the tougher one, it's not a problem because they didn't touch. But they touch, what difference does it make which one is salty? So that's the only one is the Ran. So he's machmir. So far, we don't know in what position they are. Right? All we know is that if one of them is Asr, and one of them is Heter, and the Asr one is the one that's Meliach, that's sufficient. Kol Shekin, the more so, they're both are Meliach. Both of them being salty, for sure. Asr. One of them being salty, if it's the Asr one that's salty, also a problem. As opposed to Heter being the one that's salty. Okay, again, so far what do we know? What do we know from this mechaber? That in the event that the one that's salty is the heter one, no problem.
You need hadacha.
You need hadacha. And Ramah brings down those who are matmir. Now, comes along the mechaber and says, hey, I have something else to add. Because he's referencing Siftes. An additional difference, and that is Shomen Kochush, remember that? That can also make a difference. That which we said, that when the shaman can be mefatim the isur, meliach veheter tofel. In other words, not both of them are meliach. One of them is meluach. Which one? The asur one. But now we are concerned about shaman here, because it's going to make a difference of kedei klipa and kedei shishim. And I told you a chiddush that heter mefatim leisur, if the heter shaman, even in hilchas melicha, even in meluach. Right? And I just told you that Isur, Maluach, and Heter Tofel is still Asur, right? As long as the Isur is the one that's Maluach, it's going to be always Asur. The more so both. But if the Isur alone is salty, it's good enough. But I want to right now know how much is it Asur. Is it Kedei Klip or Kedei Shishim? That depends if it's Shaman or not. And I told you that the Shaman makes no difference, whether it's the Heter or the Isur, because Heter can be Befatam the Isur. So you have a piece of Asur, or chicken, that is kochush, lean. It's a salty one. It's us and it's treif. But it's a salty one. And you have the heter that is tougher and it's not salty. The heter happens to be fatty. So it's going to asher kedei shishim, right? Because heter mefatim the iser, and the iser is the one that's salty here. Great. But Mechaber says, but wait a minute. Even that has a condition. I didn't just easily tell you that heter mefatim the iser under all circumstances. Even though by tzli, heter mefatim leisur, and I tell you that it applies to melicha too, there is one catch, as they say in English, there's a catch. It says, it has to be tator govar. That's what's interesting. Remember tator govar from the past? He says like this, Zeh shomanu be'isur meliach veheter tofer shimu shomen. Oiser ashiyeh bo shishim levato. That's dafka she'oyo ha'isur ha'meliach lemato. It's sitting in the bottom. Veheter tofer lemalo. Why? Mishum tator govar. There's a din of tator govar that not only the Levush says that not only applies to bishul or tzli, it applies to melicha too. There are shitas that hold tator govar by melicha. Machloik is a big machloik is Rishon. The Rashba, that's the way the Tur. I think this is one of those areas that the Tur doesn't go like his father, the Rosh. There's a din of tator govar. That's how the Mechaber paskin. But this tator govar is even lekula. Tator govar by itself, the concept of tator govar means it's a chumrah. Whoever's at the bottom, usually a chumrah, right, is stronger than the top.
Not dafka, if
the heter,
if
right.
the cold one is at the bottom, then it's the chumrah.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what I mean by tator govar. What does it mean, the chumrah and the kula here? The Mechaber says that this tator govar is lekula over here. What's lekula? When I said the heter mefatam le'iser, dafka kshoyo iser meliach lemato, the heter tofer lemalo mishum the tator govar, aval im hoyo a heter tofer lemato, the heter tofer is not salty, and it's shomen. It's shomen, by the way. It's lemato ve'iser meliach lemalo, eno oiser la kedei klipa. So even though I told you heter mefatam le'iser, even though it's enough that the isur be salty and not the heter. In order to make it usur more than a klipa, in order to make it usur b'shish, it has to be that the isur is at the bottom. If the heter is the one at the bottom, I don't care, it's fat. Okay, you're right. Fat makes a big difference, but if the fat is sitting in the bottom and it's the heter fat, it won't do anything. The tatar gover here would be lekula. In other words, even though heter mefatem leisur. True. And even though the salty one is the isur one, if the one sitting in the bottom is heter, forget it. The din of tatar gover, in other words, should we use the word, the physics behind it, of how it works, applies to Melicha too, the Mechaber says. Not everybody agrees with this. But it says, by tzli can make a difference. Something hot can make a difference. We're going to see the Shach has a very nice explanation as to why one says yes, one says not about the Tog over Melicha. But that's what the Mechaber's position is so far we see. That even though I told you, O Chidush, that by Melicha, Behetem Mefatem Le'isr too, as long as the Isr is the salty one, remember, if the Isr is not salty, forget it. Either they're both salty or the Isser is salty. If the Isser is not salty...
Yeah, I don't know why we say both salty. If the Isser is salty, you have the problem.
Right.
The heter, it doesn't matter if it's salty or not.
Right, okay.
That's why I don't know why he distinguishes these.
Yeah.
Because the Chayra, if the Isser and the heter is salty, they is salty.
Yeah.
And if the Isser Loson is salty, is the salty. And if you already have, in the case Isser is salty,
yeah, usually you have things being salted together. So we say,
maybe he's saying it because maybe he's saying it because something that if there is salty, that saltiness will prevent it from affecting.
That could be true.
Maybe that's why.
Like you were saying, yeah, could be also. Yeah, yeah. There is actually a possibility for that. Yeah.
He's saying both.
Both, either way, yes. So the Mechaber as the din of Tator Govar applies to Hilchas Melicha too. And here it can make a difference in the Kula if the heter, even if it's shaman, the heter shaman, it's sitting at the bottom.
Now if the Isser is shaman and not salty, then we still have the problem. It's Mifapea because of the shaman, no?
Makes no difference. Right? Makes no difference.
Which one of them is shaman?
It makes no difference regardless of whoever is shaman. Tatar Govar, the Mechaber says.
But that's in the case of your salt. So if the Isser would be shaman...
If the Isser is a shaman Isser, but it's not salty, it's not a problem. It's not gonna, it doesn't have... how is it going to be Mavliya? It needs salt to be Mavliya somewhere else. So we said, by the Hetem Efatem Le Isser, okay, that's Pitum, okay? But it would have to have salt.
But if you have salty and shaman, you don't have Davar.
If you don't have, if the heter is not salty, okay, the heter is not salty, it's not going to be a problem.
I thought the is not going to be a problem.
No, as far as pitum. 1 second. Let me see if I explained it right. Heter mefatem le'iser. Right? Heter is mefatem le'iser. So here the Mechaber explains the only way heter can be mefatem le'iser, even though he said heter mefatem le'iser, is if the iser is at the bottom. No, but
Sleep didn't make a difference.
right. We're going to see. Right.
This is a big one.
It's a kula, exactly. So even though we say heter mefatem le'iser, the heter being the shaman, and it's not salty, the iser is salty, right? That's only if the iser is at the bottom. Then we say that koyach of heter mefatem le'iser by Hilchos Melicha. Now, does it make a difference that the heter is salty or not? Obviously it does. If the heter would be salty too, then it wouldn't make a difference their position. If they both are salty, it doesn't make a difference in what position they are. So the way I understand it is what he's saying is heter, what he's qualifying, right? What he said about heter being mefatem le'iser, which is a big chiddush. Not that it's salty. If it's salty, they're both salty, right? But it's dafka when the iser is at the bottom. Okay, I think that's pretty clear.
So he says that the three things have to come together. If you have an Isser that is Maliyah, and the Heter is Tafel and Shaman, then it's only then you only have more than Ketlipa if the Isser is in the bottom.
If the Isser is in the bottom, right.
So then you have more than Kedei Klipa. Otherwise you only have Kedei Klipa.
Yeah, the Pitum would not help, otherwise you only have Kedei Klipa.
And that's when the Isser is Maliyah and the Heter
right.
is
Or
Tafel and Shaman.
if they're both Meluach. Right.
Now when they're both Maliyah, you also need
No. Then you don't. Then it doesn't make a difference in what position they are.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So
Here the chiddush of
once the
pitum.
heter is not, if the heter is not salty,
Exactly.
then you need tatagavar and shaman. If either tatagavar or shaman are missing, then you don't have the case of
Shishim.
Of shishim.
Yeah, because if you don't have shaman, then you don't have shishim. If you want to have shishim, the as is up to shishim, and only the iser is salty, it has to be that this iser was also sitting at the bottom, that it should have a koyach. Like a regular tator gover situation. The heter tofel is bottom, the iser is on the top. What happens? Ad the maker lebola. That's the concept of tator gover. Ad the maker, because of its weight, it's coming down. It will only be bolea kedei klipa. So he holds tator gover here lekula and lechumra. In other words, you still have a kedei klipa because the iser is on top and the heter is at the bottom.
Now, all that we're saying right now is the 60s, all the not only the shear, that it's an isser, it's the Rabbanan, or is it isser the Araisa, or is the Rabbanan?
Yeah, but remember, sometimes we say that it all depends. Sometimes the klipa is a chumrah, and sometimes it's meikar din. Here it's meikar din.
Aha. Yeah. So it's unlike. So it's worse than cooking. Cooking the klipa, if the isser is at the top, cooking inpa is the Rabbanan.
Sometimes it's just the chumrah, right?
Right.
Here
so this is worse than cooking.
Here's meikar din. Yes.
How can this be worse than?
By cooking everything mixed.
I'm saying if the upper one that's falling down is hot, if the meat
you're
is hot,
talking about by heat, by regular heat?
Yes.
No, it's the same. I thought you meant cooking. Cooking,
No,
not
I'm saying
not sleep.
But I'm saying where the heat is made, not the shaman.
Same thing. They're the same thing.
But by heat is what
We're machmer. Kedei netila we take over there. Remember? By sleep, by heat. Yeah. Basar b'chalav was different, remember?
Right.
The din by Basar b'chalav was different because it's not real bishul. That was the difference. Remember?
If the heat is on the top, not talking about the heat.
It makes no difference. It was not real bishul.
Why? If the hot one is at the bottom, then
it makes no difference. It was not real bishul. In a situation where it was not real bishul, remember? If it's not real bishul, the only derech bishul asr Torah. And if it's not bishul, so there's no real isser Basar b'chalav.
The meat falls in milk.
Yeah.
Kedei klipa the Rabbana. Heat is in the pot and the milk falls on top of it. Yes.
If it's in the pot.
Or the hot meat that came out of the pot is in the bottom.
Right.
It's on a plate.
Right.
And what's on top of it, that's the Rabbana.
That's what we discussed before by tzli. That's a form of tzli. Right? And that's not derech bishul.
Yeah, but milk is liquid.
And that's why it doesn't go. It doesn't answer the whole thing.
I mean, if the hot one is the
pouring was because it was only the pour.
Yeah. In that case, it was not. In that case, if I recall correctly, we can review it later. It was not an isur. It's not the isur of Basar b'chalav min Torah. It's still usur. It's still usur. It's right. It's still usur, but not because of din of bishul of Basar b'chalav. Yeah, that's what I recall. All right. So the sheet of the Mechaber is based on the Rashba.
I'm so surprised because I don't discuss that.
No, we did.
No, not us.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the sheet of the ones that hold that the Torah Gova does apply even in Melicha, the Toisus and the Rosh, and that's the way the Ramah paskins, that in Melicha you don't have the Torah Gova. And if you don't have the Torah Gova, guess what? At least according to Toisus, you wouldn't even have the Klipa. If you don't have the Torah Gova at all in Hilchas Melicha, then you don't even have the Klipa of the Isur being sitting on top of the heter, which we usually say you require a klipa. Once you hold the Torah Gova, this is according to Tosis at least, once you hold there's no Torah Gova at all in Hilchas Melicha, if the Isur is the one that's sitting on top, there's nothing. Nothing happens.
Or maybe hadacha?
Yeah, hadacha, if anything, but not klipa. Now, what should be the difference between the halacha of the Torah Gova here and in sea? Why should there be a difference? So the Shach does a good explanation here. He says, in heat, it works. For those who don't hold that there's the Torah Gova by Melicha, they basically say, in heat, it's basically the one that's in the bottom. If it's cold, it cools off. That's the way heat works. Either if it's hot in the bottom, it really is strong, heats of the one on top, or if the one that's in the bottom is cold, it really cools off the heat. It has to do with the way heat works and the way heat dissipates. But with Melicha, there's no such a thing as dissipating as a result of who's on top and who's on bottom. The way the Melicha works, it's always mavliya, regardless of its position or where it is. And it will not be mafred from the other one. That's just the way Melicha works. So Melicha works different than heat. So there's no reason to say that there should be a din of tatar gover by Melicha. The ones who hold that there's no tatar gover. That's the way the Shach explains it. Heat you can say. Just that's the way
and
heat.
that makes actually a lot of thinking out
Yeah.
of what we discussed.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense because the salt is there.
Sure, the salt is there.
So it's like it's in the pot cooking.
Right.
Because the salt
It's
is
a good
there.
point, yeah.
Whereas by something that was flying through the air, it's not in a pot cooking right now, it's flying through the
Right.
air.
By the way, by both sitting next to each other, right? They're not on top of each other. The halacha is that the only way they can both become usher is if they're both salted. Right?
Why both become usher?
No, not both. The heter will become usher only if they're both salty.
Okay.
If the isser is only salty, then you have to take off a klip. If the heter is the only one that's salty, adacha be'alma. You would just rinse it out. If they're sitting next to each other. So this mechaber really clarifies this point of Melicha very, very much.
Except it's not shaman.
Why?
If they're sitting next to each other and it's just...
No, that's if the isser is shaman, then you would have a problem. The isser is shaman and it's meluach. Yeah. The question of the heter being the shaman was a question here. Mechaber says, I told you heter mefatim the isser, but only if the isser is in the bottom. Then it has a koach of being able to do, whatever it does. Assuming that, of course, that either they're both salty or that the isser is salty. But if the heter one is the only one that's salty, and it's sitting on top, I'm saying it's sitting in the bottom, then the isser would not affect it.
Now, according to the ones that say that make a difference,
Right.
what do to each other?
That's what I just said. So the Shach brings that. It's brought down that, the only way, or maybe the Chaber says it, the only way they can both be Aser is if you have, I'm saying the only way they both could be Aser is if they're both Maluach. In other words, the Aser Ad Kedei Shish.
So the ones that Tatagavar are more mach.
Yeah.
They say you have Tatagavar,
Yeah.
and if they're not both Maluach, the case where they can be, where the Shishi.
Yeah. Let me take it back.
Tatagavar, they apparently are.
Let me take it back what I said before to you, that in the case of sitting next to each other, even if the Isur Maluach is shaman, it only would be a Kedei Klipa. The only way that sitting next to each other they could be completely Asur Ad Kedei Shishim is if they're both salty.
And then you don't need shaman. Or is that all?
No, you still need shaman for Shishim. For Shishim you need
Doesn't matter
shaman.
which one, in this case.
No, not if both are salty.
So if both are salty, if
Yeah.
one of the two is shaman, then it's next to each other, you need 60.
No. If they're both salty.
If they're both salty, one
Right.
of them is shaman, then
Right.
you need 60 next to each other.
If they're both salty,
Now, tell you again.
that's what the Mechaber said. 1 second. Then you have a problem. Even though the heter is the one that's shaman, that's what he's trying to say. Right? But that's right. And then he says that which we said, that the heter mefatem le'isur is only if the isur is at the bottom. In other words, to accomplish heter mefatem le'isur, you need a tall gover. But as far as the two of them being next to each other, even if the isur would be shaman, the only way you could have the two becoming usher, the heter becoming usher ad kedei shishi, if they were both salty. They both would have to be salty,
So,
and the isser would have to be shaman. But if the isser was shaman, and it's the only one that it was usher,
the only one that's
I'm sorry, the isser one was the one that was salty, and it was shaman, but it was not at the bottom. It was next to each other. It would only be kedei klipa. So what's interesting is the shaman here will not be as powerful if it's sitting next to each other.
The thing is, so those that come and say Tata Gavar,
Right.
they add now a Homra through Tata Gavar. Because now they do have a case where the Isser is salted and shaman, and the Heter is not, and still that's when it's at the bottom. Is that what we're saying?
No,
That through Tata Gavar they add an additional...
no, the mechaber is the one that makes a decision of the tall gover legabe heter mefatem leisur. Okay, they don't hold that there's a difference. In other words, there's such a thing as a tall gover would not make any difference whatsoever.
So then they disagree with respect to the Kula when they're next to each other. The ones that say Tata Gavar doesn't have application. What's the position of those that say Tata Gavar doesn't have an application to salting in the case of next?
They hold that the Taaruvot does not make a difference. In other words, and therefore not even a klipa is necessary.
So they would hold if it's lying next to each other. For sure, you don't even need. If you say even a klipa is not necessary.
No. Even a klipa is not necessary when the salty one is on top.
And when it's next to each other, it's worse.
Okay.
According to them, it's to each other and on top. Why does it make?
I'm sorry. One second. Let's think about it one more time.
Okay.
If they're both salty, we know it's a problem. And according to the Shita, it holds that the Taaruvot does not make a difference. Even next to each other does not make a difference. The fact is that they're both being salted.
It would be an identical case whether they're on top
Right.
of each other. Next
Exactly.
To each other.
Same is true with the Isser being.
And it has to be shaman, right? You're saying shaman and salt, or both of them salted?
No,
or
that
only shaman?
depends if you hold a klipa or shish. The Ramah is the only one that says that we're not such a bekiim between kochosh and shaman, and therefore we ask everything. But otherwise, there's a difference between kochosh and shaman.
According to everyone, whether it's a top
Yeah,
or not,
exactly.
doesn't matter.
There's always going to be a difference.
So you need the shaman in order to ask.
Yeah. There's a lot of places that don't hold like the mechaber, the heter mefatem le'isur. That was his chidush. That even by Melicha, heter mefatem le'isur. But otherwise, not everybody agrees that the heter mefatem le'isur, if the heter is the one that's shaman.
So that's a specialty now with respect to the shaman. Which one is shaman? Both
Right.
of them.
So let's assume we make a distinction between kochosh and shaman. Not like their final Ramos conclude there's no difference. If there is a distinction, like everybody pretty much says there is, then it would have to be that the Isur is the one that's shaman. That's where it's going to be Asa Kadesh.
According to everyone.
Yes. Mechaber is the one.
Mechaber, even if they're heter.
Yes. But then Mechaber says that that's only conditioned on if it's the Taaruvot.
No, what we're right about is both of them are salted. Now, if one of them is not salted,
If the
now
Isur, if the Isur is the one that's salted only, if they're both salted, it makes no difference in what position they are. Everything's being salted together, and shaman, the Isur being shaman.
or the heter being
No, the Isur being shaman.
then everyone agrees.
Yes.
The heter being shaman, the chaber holds.
Right.
They're both salted. Now we're talking about only the
Both being salted, right.
Now, if the Isser is salted, then it's just, the Chaber says the same case. Even if the Isser is only the one that's salted, we still have case.
If the Isur is in the bottom.
No.
Mechaber
If
says,
the Isser is salted.
"Mashamanu be'Isur meluach veheter tofel, she'im hu shaman oisa ad she'yeh bo
So
shish
if the
nevatloi."
heter is maluach, we'd have the same case.
If the heter is maluach, everybody agrees. It's a
Right.
problem. The chiddush was that even if the heter is not maluach, it's shaman.
Now we come back.
But that can only be if it's the Tov Govar situation, the Isur is at the bottom.
And now, according to those that hold there is no Tagavar, do they also have a situation where the Isser is, where the head is shaman and the Isser is maluach?
No, they don't hold of heter mefatim the Isur necessarily. So
So
therefore,
they don't even hold like that.
Yeah.
Regardless of that Tagavar.
it's always going to be either kedei klipa or shishim, right?
But the Isser would have to be the shaman one.
Yes, if there's a shaman, it would have to be the Isur, it would have to be a shaman.
And if neither are shaman, then you don't have 60.
Yeah, you don't have a kedei klipa if the Meliach is at least the Isur one.
So you have Melicha, Melicha is the Isser one, you have Kiklipa.
Yeah.
If the Meliach is the shaman one, then you have Kadesi. And the heter, if it's shaman or not, doesn't make sense to talk about, doesn't play a role either.
Yeah. Let me read to you the Shach, based on the Ramah. V'yesh cholkim v'omim de b'mlichach ein chilakim hu lemalo lemata, right? The Tosis in the Rosh. V'ochi nohug, that's the minhag. V'yesh cholkim, right? So the Shach says, elo bein hu lemala o lemata le'oilem ha'meliach, the one who's salted, mavliya betofel, ve'eno bolea mimeno. Right? So therefore, if as long as the Isur is the one that's salty, or kol shekin if the two are salty, he's going to be mavliya, regardless of the position that they're in. Okay, so what we said before, that if they're next to each other,
So you'll have 60.
no, if you have,
In the Shach's case, I mean.
yeah, if they're next to each other, from what I recall, even though the Meliach is the one that's shaman, I have to see if that's according to who would subscribe to that. Even though the Chavas Das brings that down, I have to see according to who that would be, if everybody holds to that. Because if they're next to each other, according to the Shita that holds, like you said, that there's no difference between Tatal Govar, if they're next to each other and the Isur Shaman is the one that's salty, why would it only answer Kedei Klipa? Okay? Just because it's next to each other. Just because it's next to each other. Okay?
They don't
based
have
on
a
that.
Tatar
Right.
so they would never have a case where it's 60. If they don't have a Tatar they
No, but we know that there is a case of that everybody agrees to.
that.
Shaman.
So which one would that be? If they
Okay.
don't hold by Tatar
Yeah, when they're being malua, I guess they're together with each other. So we have to see. We have to make into this a little bit more. What does it mean next to each other? Or it could be But that's the case only when both of them are salted. That's the case. Because that, everybody agrees. When they both are salty, Isser is Shomen, then it's Shishim. You see what I mean? I think that's what it is. It's only that because the Poshet scenarios are both salty. We added that as long as even the Isser is salty, you have a problem, at least Kedei Klipa. But the problem of being answering Ad Kedei Shishim by a Shomen, according to the Shita that does not Mechalek the Tagover, I think is they basically say it would not apply if one of them is salty, not the other one. It would have to be both of them are salty.
Now, according to the Chaber, if the Isser is salty and the Heter
Alone.
is not, you still need 60.
As long as it's sitting in the bottom. Okay, so that was the difference between the Mechaber and the Ramah. The Mechaber subscribes to the Shita that there's no Tatal Govar, and he uses that in the case of Heter, I don't know if I said it, in the case of Heter Mefatim the Isser, when the Heter one is the one that's fatty. Okay? But so what happens, one second, so what would happen? What happens according to the Mechaber if the
Isser is fatty and salty?
Isser is fatty and salty? Kol sheken if it's at the bottom.
No, without the bottom.
Being on top? That's a chidush because he holds the Torah Govar applies
so
even the
matter
kula.
which one is shaman.
Exactly. As far as being on top, you mean?
Yeah, but he says זה שאמרנו שאיסור מניח בהת הטפל שאם הוא שמן אוסר.
Right.
This is when it's tatagavar. So it seems
because
like
because of pitum. It's also because the het is mefatim. That's only if it's at the bottom, but not if it's.
That's what I'm saying. So it means, but it seems from this that
Right.
tatagavar only applies in this case. He doesn't say that tatagavar applies in the case where the is salty and shaman.
Then kol shekain, but he does. In other words, if the isur that is shaman, you're right. He doesn't say it, but if the isur is shaman and it's sitting on top, and the one on the bottom is tofel, it would only be a kedei klipa.
That's all.
Yeah.
But I would think the isur is shaman and salty would be heter is shaman.
He holds it even lekula. So we say tadin tatagav afilu lekula. If the tofel is at the bottom, it's going to have an effect on the one on top. In other words, it's going to do something to it. So even though the one on top is shaman, meluach obviously, it has a koach to I guess make it less, to lessen the effect of the melicha on it. Yeah, that's what the Meforshim seem to be saying, indicating. Yeah, no, that's what they seem to be saying. Just remember. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, the Mechaber holds the din of Tatar Govar applies to Melicha, and that means even the kula. That the one that's tofel is at the bottom, unless you see if the classical case of Melicha is everything is salty. Okay, that's what you need to remember. Everything is salty. That's typical case. We don't make a distinction shaman or kochel. We don't make a distinction else. Okay, everything is salty. We have a problem here. Now, is it klipa or shishim? Depends if it's shaman. Which one shaman? The Isser at least. The heter depends on what the mechab and the heter mefatam the Isser. Okay. Now, the fact that heter is mefatam the Isser, mechaber says that's only. It's only if the Isser is at the bottom. In other words, the heter would have to also be.
The heter that shaman is on the top, and the Isser that salty is at the bottom. Then you have tatagavar.
Yeah.
And then you have a parallel case to the Isser.
But remember, the Isser has to be Maluach over here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right? The Isser has to be Maluach here. Not that the Heter is the one that's Maluach by itself.
Right.
The Isser has to be Maluach.
Isser is Maluach at the top and at the bottom.
Right.
And the Heter is Shaman.
Right.
Then, if the Isser is at the bottom, then
it could be Mefatim, right.
Then you have 6.
Right.
Otherwise, it could be.
Right. So therefore, in a situation where everything is salty, it's easy.
It's easy, but it's also
yeah. No, but the question is, what happens if they both are salting? They're side by side. Okay. There's no tatol gavar.
So now you want to apply tatagavar by both.
What? No, if they're both salty side by side.
Yes. You didn't make that distinction.
Everybody would hold that they would become aser.
Right.
Okay. Everybody does.
Nobody said that tatagavar makes a difference.
Now the question is it b'kedei klipa or kedei shishim?
If the Isser is shaman, everyone will say kedei is shaman, and both
Right,
are salty.
right.
And if the heter is shaman, then the mechaber will hold heter hapeya, and he will also say right.
Right.
Whereas the rest of the
because the two of them are salty.
Right.
The koshik and the heter would be mefapea.
Right.
Because even if the heter is not salty, just the Isser is salty, there could be a piapua. But that's only if it's a togova.
Right.
So they see. So the only case where everybody pretty much would agree that the whole thing can become aser, the shishim or b'kdei klipa, according to everybody, side by side, is if they're both salty. If only the Isser is salty,
then the Isser has to be 6.
no. If they're side by side and only one of them and only the Isser is salty, then it would only go Kedei Klipa.
So it's shaman.
Even if it's shaman, that's the chiddush. Okay, that's the chiddush, that if side by side, even if the Isser is shaman, it does not have the koyach to be mavli as much. And the only reason we said it's also Kedei Shisha is we're talking about a scenario where they're both salty.
So if the Isser is salty,
That's the way the Chavez Dasa thing is.
So if the Isser is salty and shaman, and their side, you'll have only Klipa.
Right.
But if the Isser is salty and at the
According to Mechaber.
yes.
Yeah.
But if the Isser is salty at the bottom and the header is at the top, according to the Mechaber, the is worse. The Isser is salty and shaman side by side.
Yeah, Tatol Govar. Only because of din of Tatol Govar. Side by side is not a Tatol Govar. So therefore, even if there's a Shom involved, unless they're both salty.
But I thought that the is of the header only is a chumrah. Saying even if the header is salty, you might think because it won't absorb. No, even if it's salty, it still absorbs. But certainly, if the Isser is the one that's salty and the header is not salty, why on earth should and the Isser is shaman? Why on earth should it not affect it?
It does Kedei Klipa only.
Why Kedei
It doesn't go Kedei Shisha.
And then if the header is salty as well, then it's Kadesh. I mean,
If there's a Tatol Govar situation,
that's if the header is shaman and is salty.
it's salty. Yeah, being at the bottom.
But what we're saying right now that the
Side by side.
side by side, the header is the side by side. They're both salty, and the Isser is shaman. We're saying, and side by side, the shaman and salty, and the header is not salty. We're saying only right.
Right.
So why I'm surprised about it is why the fact that the header would be salty would be a worst case. Worst case.
Again, according to the Shita, the whole that there's no din of Tatol Govar.
No.
Forget about Tatol Govar. According to the Shita, there's no Tatol Govar. The one that's salty will always be mavli on the other one.
In other words, the one that's salty will transfer blias into the non-salty.
Into the non-salty one.
So if the Isser is salty,
But
it'll transfer its blias to the non-salty one.
right.
But if it's shaman,
Shaman,
as well,
it appears to be, from what I've seen.
shaman makes it go beyond Kedei
Yeah,
Klipa.
but it appears to be that from the Chavez Das, I have to check. I think it's the Chavez Das, that if the Isser is shaman and salty, but it's only sitting next to the other one, it will not go shishim. It would only go Kedei Klipa.
But if the other one, now we're saying if the other
Unless
one
they're
is
both
salty as
salty.
well. So in other words, if the header is salty as well, it's worse than if only the Isser is salty.
Yes, according
Now I
to that.
thought what it accomplishes.
That's always true.
But I thought what it accomplishes that the header is salty is now that the header one will also be giving off. Because what does the salt accomplish?
Yeah.
Give off.
Yeah, but
So if the
if it's
the
giving
header
off,
one
yeah.
is busy giving off,
Yeah, but here-
so the chayra it should be more makel than if
yeah,
the
but here we said that the heter giving off does not make a difference. Remember, unless it's blood.
Well, if it doesn't make a difference, it shouldn't make a difference. But here we're saying it does make a difference. Saying by the header one being salty and giving off, it's a worse case than if the header one is not salty. That's why I'm so surprised.
One more time, if they're both being salty, or at least the Isser being salted, right?
The shuman makes that it's mifapeya,
Right,
and the salt makes it it's giving off.
right.
So why would the header being salty make the situation worse? All the salt accomplishes by the header, if anything,
Oh, it's to be.
is that it gives off, not that it absorbs more. So why would be a worse case? I would think that if you're going to make a difference in the case, that you say if the header is salty, there would be a tzad to be more makel, because now the header is giving off. But why would the header being salty make it a worse case?
Yeah, I see your question. That's a good question. In the case of them, all of them being salted, and the Isser being an Isser shaman, so we say it's mefapea.
Because of the shaman.
Because of the shaman.
Not because of the salt of the header.
Right.
So what's the salt of the header doing?
No, because in that case, we say mefatem.
In order to be mefatem, the header must be seen.
Well, one second. In your case, it was that the Isser was shaman?
The Isser is shaman, yes.
The Isser is shaman. So when the Isser is shaman and they're both salty, then it goes farther.
So the salt makes it absorb more?
The both being salty and not just one over the other makes the whole thing one unit, right? What are we trying to distinguish here? We're trying to distinguish here of b'chdei klipa or b'chdei shish.
Right.
Okay, so we said that according to this, Chavadas, if they're side by side, it would only be b'chdei klipa.
Unless the header is also.
If the heter is also salty, then it's mefapea even more.
It's interesting.
It's interesting, yeah.
Because really, we normally say that the fact that it's salty that gives off, not absorb.
Yeah, maybe it's because it's more heat, but maybe we should look into it. That's a good question.
Like you said, it becomes like.
Yeah, but that's a very abstract thought. I mean, bottom line is.
The piapur, because it's side by side, remember, they don't hold Tatar Govar. They hold, it's Kedei Klipas. And the ones that hold B'chdei Shishim is only when at least the Isser is shaman. So the Isur Shaman, the Melicha, is able to take it farther than just a Kedei Klipa. But if it's side by side, apparently it cannot go that far if only the Isur is salty. Maybe if the two of them are salty, it can go a little bit farther. That's okay. So that's a good question. We'll look into it a little bit. I don't think.
Like you said, Amalo be'isur. The Rama says Amalo be'isur shamen. The dina tzarich shishim. So is he talking about a case where both of them are?
That's the standard case. Right, that was the Mechaber in Sif Yud, that Bamed Dvar Mamurik she'isur be'heter shnei meluchim, v'afilu isur meliach v'heter tofel. That you have, that it can...
That comes later. The Rama here is before.
Right. We have to see if everybody's masking to that side by side. Because the Mechaber, the only time he brings in the concept of Tator Gover is in the case of where the heter is mefaten to the Isur. Zeh shomer b'isur meliach v'heter tofel shim hu shomen oisir ad sheyeh bo shishim dafrik shoyo isur hamaliach lemato. Okay, and it's shomen. No, I'm sorry, shimu shomen, that the heter is shomen. Dafrik shoyo isur hamaliach lemato v'heter tofel lemalo. Kol sheken if the isur itself is shomen. Okay, but he seems to be saying that this is only in the case of pitum. In the case where there's no heter being mefaten, when the shaman is the one that's fat, the din of tatar gover would be a kula. That if the shaman is sitting on top, it would be only kedei klipa. And what do we learn from that? You can infer from that the same is true by side. Because side by side is not any worse, Ilan, right? Than the top one being sitting on the bottom. It's not anymore. If anything, the one that's sitting on top, I would think it's worse. But it's not. It's the same. If that's the case, we still need to understand why, if everything is salted together, because it's just one unit.
From the lesson of the Mechaber.
The piapua. The question is, does the piapua travel? And we said by shaman it does. By shaman it does when they're both salty. It's all like being salted together. It's like being roiseach together. I think that's the poshup shot. That there's just more koach involved in that. If it's only one being salty, not the other one, it would have to be tatar gover. Otherwise, it doesn't have the same koach. If they're both salty, like you pointed out too, it's all one unit. Yeah.
But
I
what
think
does
that's
it mean one unit? What does it mean unit?
Yeah.
What does it mean one
It's
unit?
all being together salted as one thing.
So,
yeah.
so what does the salting accomplish?
So the salt has more koach of taking the tam. It's like being cooked together. It's all in one pot. It's all one heat. It's all one thing. It's just like baitzli next to each other. When you only have one, you know what it would be similar to? It's like kovush. Half the piece is kovush, the other half is sticking out. It just doesn't go to that's the machlokes. Does it go to the top or not? The portion that is kovush is fine, but the one that's sitting outside the water, why should it be affected? It maybe doesn't reach to the top. So when only one piece, I'm almost sure that's the pshat. When one piece is salty, even if it's the Isur piece, it can only go kedei klipa. As it is, remember, as it is, they said, a lot of them poskim say that it's only klipa by Melicha. And what we wanted to say that by shaman it goes more. Does it go more in every kind of situation? Apparently not. Even the Mechaber, who says that his pitum concept is conditioned that the Isur is at the bottom.
But the pit is on the shaman, not the shaman.
Right. So that's, yeah, but anyway, we could look further into it, but that's, I think, the poshup shot. Okay, just to finish up over here. The last few halachas we could leave if you want for Thursday. They deal with another concept of Melicha and Kalim. Can you make cheese in pots or pans of goyim that had Isser in them? And we will see, we'll leave it for Thursday, we will see that when it comes to Melicha, as strong as it may be, Melicha does not have the strength to extract an Isser from a kelim. It could be Mavliya perhaps into a kelim, but it cannot extract a tam. So if you have a treif kelim, you're salting your meat, if it's clean, you would be able to do it. Some say you shouldn't do it lechatchila, but it wouldn't be a problem. It's not going to be a problem. It does not extract. It's not as hot as it's, right? It's for sure not bishu. So this is also a shayla. It comes up with yain in yain nesach, in hilchos yain nesach, about barrels of wine that were used for yain nesach. They're clean. Now somebody's pickling something in there, making herring. But the blias of the wine was only through tzoinen to begin with, okay? The blias were only through tzoinen, and even if they were not, something which is maluach, even though it's keresech, something which is brine, salty, and so forth, it will not bring out the tam that is inside the walls of the barrel. We'll talk about it a little bit later. There's another question of tam nefgam as well. We discussed in the past. How as far as the wine, the tam of the wine being poigem in whatever it is, that whether it was whiskey or something else. There was a question about that, because the problem was kovush. It's sitting in a barrel for a long time, which is a separate problem. Sitting with the liquid for a number of days or whatever could be a different kind of a problem. Here, it's only a question of being moleach, of salting, and it's a temporary situation that does not have the same koach. It will not extract the tam. What is that? Right, so that could be, once you leave it for a certain amount of time, then of course you'll run into the problem of kovush, being kovush in a keli, which is different than melicha. Melicha being perhaps at the bottom of all the potential isurim. In other words, the method of melicha would not be equivalent, not even close to kovush or sli, in being able to extract the tam. If all it is an hour or two or whatever it is, and it's yavish and it's not even involved. Okay, maybe we'll leave this for Thursday.